Welcome, everybody, to Mentor Time. Here's a topic I thought we had done a year or so ago, and I looked it up when I was starting to put the slide deck together, and it was in the middle of 2021 when we last talked about social proofing. So it's a good thing we're talking about social proofing in your career in the age of AI. Here's the takeaway. Take control of your social proof so you know where it shows, and what to expand. And we'll be talking about that as we go through. I just want to know in the chat, yes or no, do you have a definition for yourself of what social proof is? A 1 or a 0 would be great. Thank you. I've got a no and a 1. And I'm not surprised from those who are here. That's why I wanted to cover this, because it's starting to surface again in a lot of the LinkedIn posts. It's always talked about in some fashion by some people, but it's becoming one of those phrases that's back in fashion again, which is probably why I thought, oh, we should cover this. Here's what I'm hearing from you all, though, when I ask about it. People tell me all the time, "So I don't have any social proof. I meant to write, I don't think of it." Someone who has no idea about it and says to me, "Why should I care what it is?" And I understand that, certainly. It's not been something that's been so urgent as it is now. And many of you are saying something along the lines of, AI is everywhere, I'm giving up. It's everywhere, it's doing everything. I can't really control it. So here's how we're going to get here. Today we're going to talk about social proof, do I have it? Then we'll go on to what does social proof look like? And finally, as always, we end with what should you do? As we talk about social proof, here's the description, the definition that I actually presented 3 years ago. I researched it again this past weekend, and there were a lot of different definitions, and this is still the best and easiest without a lot of explanation to have you listen to and understand. In some fashion, it is what they call normative social influence, a psychology term. People will conform in order to be liked, similar to, or accepted by the influencer, whoever that is. They separate out society, but influencer is not the Instagram influencers that have been built over the last few years, but it's the people who influence our decisions and buying. Now, if you want to go back to the original social proof, I went more into detail on this, and I'll put the link in the email I send you with the link to this recording. But here's a screen of it that's related to job searching. Social proof works for both companies and individuals. And in this case, my ex-company, Social and Scientific Systems, I discovered, was rated for someone who had an interview for a research associate. And this is the kind of social proof companies and brands worry about. But you could put your name up there and you would have similar things, not interviews that you're being rated on by one company, but you would have something that bears in your career, in your social proof of what do people think about you. It's not just what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's what's out there on the interwebs. It's what you're known for, and we have some examples. But I did get more updated information. In fact, AI hadn't even been born in our minds. ChatGPT came out in September of 22, I think it was. But this is a two-part highlighted. Social proof is highly influential in the age of AI for your career. But the credibility problem we're having is the new scrutiny and the difficulties as AI is evolving. I'm restating it. So the person who wrote this is making sure we all understand this is where authenticity is going to help you. People who recommend you, people who endorse you, referrals that you get from other people or referrals you make to people, and communities that you may be in. When I looked for a framework for types of social proof, there were many people who had the same list of 6 or 7. None of them cited where it came from. I think I found the original source, but decided not to use it. And in fact, the 7, a couple of them weren't that helpful. So I did find one from Protocol 80, and they basically categorize it as 5 types. And these types are important just to give you a sense of all the ways you touch people in your career. The expert social proof, think of someone who knows you as a boss, someone who hires you for a consultancy. Celebrity social proof, that's when someone gets on in the old days on Twitter and says, "Oh, I can't believe Dr. Lisa on the street followed me." She's really famous for health literacy with underserved populations, for example. User social proof is what the people who use your product say. And those of you who consult, those of us, all of us on here today in public health, those are the people that we work with who use our services and give us feedback and sometimes actually recommendations. And then there's 2, wisdom of the crowd's social proof. And I put FOMO in parentheses because they referred to that as they discussed it. But the wisdom of the crowds is, as people start to talk about you, you become more prevalent in what's on a platform. You're featured more, or you're on LinkedIn. A post I've done, and suddenly you become aware of me. So that is the wisdom of the crowds. And we see this if you go back to many of your the public health work you've done. You probably have heard some variation of the neighborhood effect on whether there's going to be an uptake of a public health intervention. For me, for example, we were fighting in a development setting in Asia that women coming to the clinic to bring their children at 6 weeks for vaccinations didn't want the tetanus toxoid vaccine because they were told by their neighbors that it would make them sterile. That's the wisdom of the crowds taking what they're recommending. And the wisdom of your friends is something that we all do. You may think, "Oh, I might try that restaurant." And then someone says to you, "Oh, I was there last week. You really have to go." Suddenly it goes up in your list, in your mental list, whatever. And you think, "Oh, if Mary thought it was great, then I'm certainly going to enjoy it." This is from several sources because these are people who also mixed the types of social proof that I just went over with sources that you get it from. So I've categorized these into internal and external. The external is what others do: endorsements, testimonials, referrals, recommendations, community validations. I didn't list every single way you can take this, but those are the big things that people are going to be doing for you or about you. Internal are the things you do, what you put out there. Now, case studies and data numbers were in the cxl.com blog. And it was specifically brands describing the success they've had with different things, or the big numbers: 14,000 users in less than 6 months. I added the expertise platforms and the professional platforms because we are known and able to use LinkedIn and other places, Twitter, if you're still on there, Threads, Blue Sky, to show our expertise. So that is an important way to think about, where is my social proof coming from? So I got out my favorite LLM. I actually used Perplexity because 2 years ago I had to pay for a paid version to get enough transcripts summarized before the GPTs became huge. So I've got it on my desktop. I can get it on my phone. And I asked it to tell me about my social proof. And I basically said, "Tell me about the social proof of Dr. Sue Griffey, DRPH, I think I said." And it's summarized into the categories on the left. Now you'll notice the red X. They got it wrong. They said someone else established the Sue Mentors Pom Pom Award, which isn't true. I did. I decided to do it all on my own just to celebrate the people who were helping me a lot in early COVID, and I've since gone on. But the rest of it was pretty well summarized. And as you can see, if I'm pointing correctly, you can see here, it'll give you the sources that it used. And I'm not surprised. It's mostly for me going to use LinkedIn, YouTube. There's some things from Tulane and other things. And I wasn't at all surprised. I liked the way it categorized it, and it made it helpful for me to think about the frameworks I just showed, the framework types of social proof. And then it made a nice summary sentence. For example, if you ever needed to talk about, you wouldn't necessarily talk about your own social proof, but you could use the information of my expertise has been recognized by third-party testimonials, creation, leadership, whatever summarizes for you. But then I thought, oh, wait, maybe I should use the categories I just did a icon array of, or it wasn't an icon array. And so I said, okay, now take those categories and give me Sue's social proof. And again, it got the Pom Pom Award wrong. But also I found it wasn't so helpful reading it, because when you read Sue's expert social proof, it's like the laundry list I talk about in your resume. She did this. It wasn't necessarily a summary. So that's my thought on that. Now, that was me, and I know I've got a lot out on LinkedIn, YouTube, a lot of other places. So I thought, okay, let's look at what does social proof really look like. An interesting article on using AI in, and not surprisingly, in social proof is helping take the grunge work out of the analyses I just showed you, which took all of 2 or 3 minutes each of those to prompt it and then download it and take a quick look at it. Not surprisingly, as we've talked about with everything we've talked about in AI and that you all are finding and more, you can quickly do the things that give you value. Increase your efficiency by getting metrics, by surfacing key themes, by comparing. In this case, I compared it to frameworks. And then another article talked about just what I said, but what I thought was important about this is if you have different kinds of platforms, and I don't know what these are, but these review management platforms, I assume it's for a performance review, but I didn't really care enough to go into detail. But it could look for an update. It could say, oh, Sue got reviewed last year. Now let's compare it to what she's doing this year. So there's a lot that AI helps that we need to think about how it's using our social proof, even at an employee level, because after 2 years, an employer would know a lot about you or your supervisor and the things you've done for the company. So I took advantage of 2 people that always show up, or almost always when they're available. And one's here today, and they've let me use themselves as examples. So I just gave them Peter Williams, NPH, from Tulane, because Peter, you have a very common name, and I thought I needed to give them something. It found you immediately. I thought it did a really good job. And the only question I had, and I think I remember you telling me these numbers, but I didn't go back and look at the work we did a few years ago. But it said credited with designing more than 60 program implementation plans and 40 training modules. And it has a very nice paragraph at the bottom, but note that they start with a caveat clause that says, while he didn't get any of these things from Tulane, and then went on to say, Peter has built reputational and social proof through his document work, global leadership, and engagement as a Tulane graduate, shaping health system innovation. And I thought, oh, that's really nice. I was going to take what I call the caveat clause out, that dependent clause that they're like declaiming, oh, he didn't really do all that much, but he's great and he's innovating. So I enjoyed seeing that. And Peter, I've given you all these references and I'll send you the document so you've got it if you wanted to compare it to the GPT you might use. And then I thought, what about Sheila? So Sheila lives in Nairobi. She's had a career in Nairobi. She now also in her new job, she's had it 2.5 years already. She is working regionally in several East African countries. So I gave them her name, including her maiden name, and said, please tell me Sheila Etam from Nairobi, Kenya. And that's all I said. They found the BRAC work and they talked about all these things. Now, by the time I got down to awards, I looked at that pick honored among Kenya's 50 most influential women in 2025, and I thought, if she was, it must have been in the last week because we saw her a week ago and she would have told us. And then I went and looked up that award list, and there was no Sheila Etam on that list. So we've got to be careful. And then I got down to leadership, and the first sentence says provides global assistance designing these training programs for different program orgs in Nairobi. And I know she doesn't work beyond BRAC. So that's why the question mark is there. So we're not surprised. But again, it talks about her social proof validated through award-winning work, the impact on rural communities. And they got all the work that she's done on financial, agricultural, financial, and economic work that she's been doing before she came to BRAC and what she brought to BRAC. So that was all good and correct. All right, so we've looked at that through the lens of AI, but what is the problem? The problem we're running into now is AI is so good that it's being exploited for all of these risks. Fake endorsements, we've all heard about people rating companies badly and getting their friends to rate the companies badly if they haven't hired them, or people do that with restaurants. There are pods, they bulk reviews. Lots of people get together and do a review on Amazon. Amazon's tried to control it, but a few years ago it was rampant, where people would be putting up the same review, a horrible review on a pair of sneakers, for example. This I haven't seen, reputational penalty, where there's bias against AI users, except for those that use it in job seeking. And all they do is put some stuff in ChatGPT and get a resume out of it, and then they send it out to 100 companies, mass mailing. They seem to imply, and I had read this a few months ago, that professionals who are using AI are seen as less competent. But I have to say, this article, there's a lot of articles that summarize this to get this into this table. And I have all those in the references, but it's not that they're less competent, it's that we all haven't learned how to describe the efficiencies, the gains, the change in the way our work is now with AI availability to us. Definitely privacy threats. In the last month, I know of 3 or 4 people who, one's a big LinkedIn expert, but someone else was just a normal person like me on LinkedIn whose profile got hijacked. Same name, same picture, different email information. And they were trying to get her business because she has a very good and profitable business. So that's a problem. Privacy threats, people are using that to surface a lot of data about you, all of us, and can make threats even more easily than they could already with the internet. And the huge problem we have with misinformation. So there are risks in this for you and your career, for all of us in our career and our lives. But I just wanted you to be aware that it also appears that there's you'll see in a few minutes, there's more ways you can keep your eye on what's going on with this, kind of like you keep your eye on your bank account. You don't let it go months without checking, or the credit card, the things that have cleared. So now we're on to what do we do? All right. I'm asking both of you, put in the chat, have you ever checked your social proof? Yes or no? And if no, will you do it? Just very quickly tell me yes or yes, no and yes, or no and no, whatever. Mm. One person says, no, thought about though now I'm thinking about doing it. I hope you do. Another person says, yes. So I'm not surprised, especially with the way we started, but there is a way to think about this. So the first thing you're going to do is educate yourself about yourself in a different view. And this goes along with those who may remember a few months ago when I did making a career portfolio out of your portfolio career. So you're going to take your favorite LM and just give a prompt. That's all I wrote for me. Now, if you have a common name like Peter, you might need to give a location. I gave his degree and they seem to be able to locate him very well. And as you saw with all three of us, there were things that were not accurate. So there are still hallucinations in what they're scraping. This would seem intuitive, but I liked that Sean Tarnoff, well-known expert in business and I think efficiency, that you could use these steps to go forward. So look at your major skills and outcomes you expect to be wanting to talk about. And then use that to collect endorsements. For example, one of the things that LinkedIn offers, and there's fewer of us who have been talking about it, but there is a LinkedIn endorsement, which is different from a recommendation. And endorsements allow you to endorse the skills that you know someone has. The old conventional wisdom when LinkedIn was prompting us to endorse our friends and colleagues was to do 3 to 4 at least for a person of things that you know, even if you hadn't worked with them directly. But these are also including testimonials, referrals, recommendations. Now, I do think that each person should try to have an updated recommendation on your LinkedIn every few months if you can get someone to write one. And it's a topic we can talk about, but it will just help it stay fresh. I don't know how LinkedIn values those. The LinkedIn experts tell me recommendations count for a lot, and you won't be surprised, all of us in public health and project management, we're sitting there thinking one recommendation is only the positive experience of one person, but that's a different story. And then as you get those and you get endorsements, you get recommendations, you get to see what people are thinking and know about you. And you link it to your concrete evidence and context coming from your outcomes and your skills. And then decide to share it in as many places as possible. So it's not that you are going to obtain your own social proof. But if, for example, there are things perhaps Peter could do more on LinkedIn with all his free time, but talking about going on and doing additional epidemiology training and what he's finding about in follow-up, for example, so that he continues to be seen in the lane of epidemiology teaching and also of the emergency and preparedness work he's done. And then he says, refresh regularly, keep authentic. Again, how much can you do? It's what we can put out there that makes a difference. And LinkedIn's algorithm, as far as people can tell in this murky world of LinkedIn, changed to now value people staying mostly within their expertise areas and not writing a whole lot of different kinds of posts, which never applied to me because I don't even do a weekly post some weeks. So these are things you can, though, be aware of. And at least if you, it's like doing a Google vanity search. This what's my social proof would be something you should do every quarter or every 6 months to get a sense of, oh, that's what I'm being seen for. And if you have time and you really want to, you could test it out on 2 different GPTs and see how they compare you, for example. All right, we've talked a little bit about this, but specific things you can do. Showcase your expertise and credibility. I talked about your expertise, but remember that also includes interactions where you're networking with people and you don't just say, oh, hey, how's the weather up there in Minnesota? You say, oh, the last time I heard about Minnesota, they had joined the Alliance for blah, 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 and whatever. Things that show that you are engaged and looking at, for example, Peter, preparedness. Highlight testimonials. That can be a broad range of things. I would, again, talk about endorsements, talk about referrals that you receive. For example, if I were still consulting, I used to get people sending me job postings to take on a full-time job, and they would always say to me, so and so recommended you. That's essentially a referral. Success stories is something you can write about. And Peter, as I mentioned the last time when you went out to Micronesia, you wrote some very interesting posts on what you were doing and what the students, their professional epidemiologists, what they were doing and learning and the kinds of discussions. So that's how you could couch that as success without feeling like you were just saying, I was great out there teaching. And if you get any certifications and awards, those are always helpful. A little more specifically, if you wanted to create a portfolio on a professional website, I forgot to take out the or, because I think the or was GitHub, and most people who would watch this are not going to be on GitHub. Demonstrate social media influence. That, again, is up to you how much you want to do it. I'm known for LinkedIn and YouTube right now. I used to be known for Twitter because there was a huge public health and health literacy contingent groups and evaluation groups on Twitter. So that was the old days. Get endorsements. In this case, I would use LinkedIn endorsements, and leverage the actions of others. And by that, what I believe they didn't have a huge explanation, but if someone's writing a post about something that's near and dear to your heart, add a substantive comment on showing that you know about what they were talking about. Network effectively, you know how to do that. Participate in a community, you know how to do that. But talk about them. Not I went out networking, but I met so, and his question really challenged me to think through blah, 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 whatever. And all of you that I know attend this regularly are doing this. Be a resource by sharing your knowledge. So I'm just curious if one of you wants to unmute and tell me, how are you going to use this information of what we went over? Basically a high-level glance at the AI and social proof, but hopefully gave you some thoughts. Anyone? Or put it in the chat. I was trying to save you from writing. All right. Oh, go ahead, Hiram. Thank you.
Yeah. So I was just thinking about this. So I think I can see this being a sort of like a collaborative project that you can do with an AI chat, where you start with the assessing the gaps based on what you shared with us, and then putting together some action steps to then start filling in those gaps. So I think that's how I'm going to approach this.
I love that. It's brilliant. It's much more brilliant than the list I gave you that came from different people. That's great. I love that idea. And the fact that you can do it in a way that you can document it and then could continue to update it as you are gaining more and more skills and areas of project management that you're getting both education and experience in. I love that. That's great. Thank you. To remind you of the takeaway. You'll take control of your social proof. And now you know how to look for where it shows, what it shows, and what to expand on. And this has to be the first time I've had 2 pages of references, because when I would search on Google or Perplexity, they would both give me summaries. This is reference 1, 7, and 6. So that's the challenge of citing all of our AI work. Any last comments or questions? All right, then. Thank you very much. We'll be meeting 2 weeks from now. Actually, I'm going to be changing some of the topics because I think there's a few more urgent things we need to talk about before the end of the year and into January. Thank you. Good to see you all. Travel safely, Peter, and glad to see you, Hiram.